When I relocated from New York City back home to Wichita, Kansas to be a primary caregiver for my mom who had non-Hodgkin lymphoma, which had metastasized to her brain and spinal cord, I had no sense of when my time in the role would end, nor did I have an understanding of what condition my mom would be in when that time came. I just really wasn't thinking that far ahead. But the reality was far different than I could have ever even imagined. In the moment I included for September 30th in my book, Losing Linda May, a Cancer Caregiving Memoir, my mom begrudgingly tells me that I am no longer needed as a primary caregiver. In reality, she wanted me to stay around as long as humanly possible, but my dad told her that she needed to be the one to let me go back to New York City. She was self-sufficient at this point. She certainly wasn't thriving, but she could do all of the basic necessities on her own, which made me comfortable with leaving. And in the moment I included for October 1st, I actually mentioned how it probably would have been detrimental if I would have stuck around longer because I would have kept cooking and cleaning and tending to her every need, and that wouldn't allow her to do the real world rehabilitation that was necessary to further her recovery. For this reason, I knew it was the right decision, but it also didn't feel particularly good leaving my mom. Plus, no longer being a caregiver and going back to New York City meant restarting my life, which was really daunting because I was somehow going to become a business owner and an entrepreneur and a travel consultant instead of just going back to being a receptionist at an acupuncture center. So basically, I was on a precipice of an identity crisis all of these days in the book, and I had a lot of conflicting emotions because of that. First and foremost, I was really happy that I'd be back in New York City, surrounded by all my friends. And as I discussed in the moment I included for October 2nd with Heidi, one of my good friends from growing up, and my parents, I just had no affinity for Wichita. Nothing about that city appealed to me. And there was never even a thought throughout the entirety of my time being a primary caregiver that I would ever decide to move back there permanently after the experience just to be closer to my parents. I didn't even entertain the thought of moving somewhere like Chicago, which is at least a direct flight away. I had no desire to be in the Midwest for any duration of time that was longer than a couple weeks. And then I get really sad when I think about how much time my mom would be spending alone because she wasn't going back to work. So while my dad was at the primary dental practice throughout the week, she would just be at home watching daytime talk shows, scrolling through Facebook, playing Candy Crush, and half-heartedly doing her rehabilitation exercises. That didn't really seem like a very fun life to be living. Speaking of my dad, I was really worried about him because throughout my experience being a primary caregiver for my mom, I became his rock and his sounding board and the person that he would vent to. And I also really reduced the pressure on him to always be around because I was always taking care of my mom and making sure that she had a companion so he could do things after work like run errands or work on the yard. Whereas in my absence, I knew that she would get really frustrated with him if he wanted to do anything other than just be around her because she was spending all that time alone during the day. I was also really scared about what the future might bring. As much as we were all feeling pretty optimistic because she had a really good run of luck, we were all going back to that single-digit survival rate that her oncologist gave after the cancer had metastasized. So the thought that the cancer would come back was lingering on all of our minds despite all the positivity, and that terrified me. And then I find myself on the complete other end of the spectrum where I was feeling relief that I would no longer be a primary caregiver. I'd be back in my own space. I'd be on my own schedule. I'd be able to do whatever I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it. I'd be able to be social with my friends who were my age and meet new people, go on dates and hook up. I could be my full self. How could I not look forward to that? Finally, I was profoundly grateful that I had the opportunity to support my parents in their time of need. I end the last moment I included for October 3rd in my book with this sentiment. The outpouring of love and appreciation I have received during my time home will never be matched. With certainty, I know that of anything I will achieve in my lifetime, my parents will always return to these past months as their greatest source of their pride. Little did I know at the time that I was actually just taking a month-long breather from being a primary caregiver, but more on that in part 4 of my book. In the meantime, the next video I'll be releasing will be on October 4th, and I'll be talking about being led to believe that I had type 2 diabetes, which I ended up cutting from my book. So hit subscribe, leave any questions in the comments. The link to Losing Linda May is in the description, and I will see you all on the 4th.